So I would like to call upon our second speaker, Dr. Martha Rhoades. And to give you a short bio of Martha, she's a research manager and instructor of environmental health at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Her research focus on health outcomes associated with exposure to nitrate and nitrosatable agrichemicals in drinking water. She uses population studies to examine exposure in relation to non-Hodgkin lymphoma and birth outcomes in conjunction with laboratory experiments to establish mechanistic pathways and the role of gene-environment interaction. Martha is the project leader for the birth outcomes and water study, evaluating the association between these exposures and material risk for birth and adverse birth outcomes. Dr. Rhoades studied at the University of Nebraska, earning her BS in chemistry and psychology from UNL in 2001, and her Ph.D. in environmental toxicology from UNMC in 2010. Martha?
Thank you. Well, I appreciate being here. I feel very honored to be invited. I love my job, but it's these kinds of meetings that really put the icing on the cake, so thank you again. I neglected to bring brochures with me, but if you're interested in the BOW project, there's the website there. It's available, bow.unl.edu. So we'll just go on. This stems basically from my dissertation project. It's pretty well known. You've seen these maps over the past day or so. Nitrate and atrazine are the most prevalent drinking water contaminants in Nebraska. So the nitrate map shows the wells that are positive for concentrations that are above 2 milligrams per liter. We use that number because USGS researchers have determined that anything above 2 to 3 milligrams per liter is anthropogenic, basically introduced by humans. And then the map on the right shows wells sampled for atrazine through those years. Again, the water source, or the source of the data, is from the quality assessed agrichemical contaminant database for Nebraska groundwater. So this is not necessarily representative of all wells in the state, but wells that were sampled and the data was high enough quality to be entered into this data set. Is it plausible? Well, there is some information out there about nitrosatable compounds, which atrazine is a nitrosatable compound because of that secondary amine moiety. And I'm not a chemist, so I won't go into that today. We know that nitrosoatrazine easily forms at a pH that's similar to the human stomach. So our hypothesis is that this is a contaminant that's formed in vivo, not necessarily in the water systems because of that pH requirement. We know that many nitrosamines are carcinogenic and teratogenic in animal models. And there's a study that shows that there's some chromosomal aberrations in human lymphocytes related to exposure to that compound. So our hypothesis is that the exposure to the mixture is more toxic to humans than either one of those contaminants alone. And I'll just give you an example of that. Mary Ward, who is with the CDC, she did a study in Nebraska looking at nitrate and risk for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and she's found a positive association. Then she went across the border to Iowa and tried to repeat that study, and that association wasn't there. So we wonder, okay, there must be some confounder, or she wasn't looking at the mixture, and so it was the presence of atrazine that gave her those positive results in Nebraska. The first study we did was looking at the association between non-Hodgkin's lymphoma in Nebraska and these two compounds. And what we found was there was no association between nitrate or atrazine by themselves, but when we looked at the combination, that there was about a 2.5 times increased risk for those folks exposed. Then when we stratified the data by lymphoma type into 3 different types, an indolent B cell, and an aggressive B cell, and a T cell lymphoma, that risk went up. And again, I'm not going to go into the chromosomal genetics of that today, but we have some ideas on why that might be the case. And so again, the hypothesis is that increased non-Hodgkin's lymphoma risk is due to in vivo formation of nitrosoatrazine causing these chromosomal aberrations during metabolism, leading to that tumor formation. So then we went right back into the lab, and we used a chicken embryo model and found some birth defects. And we know that a lot of times cancer and birth defects have the same mechanistic pathway for the result. And these pictures up here basically just show you a normal 5-day old chicken embryo, and then the ones that were treated, and the heart defects and GI defects were the most prominent malformations seen. So then we took this information with our non-Hodgkin's lymphoma information, and we went right back into the surveillance and the population studies. And the national rate for birth defects is about 3% of all live births in Nebraska, or in the U.S. And the Nebraska rate is a little bit higher than that, at about 6%. There's about 600 to 1,200 birth defect cases per year. That means individuals with some defect or another. The highest is, again, the cardiovascular and the genitourinary. So we kind of made this connection. Okay, we'll just move on. And of course, my advisor was Dr. Spaulding, and he said, now Martha, you know that really the degradates of atrazine are pretty prevalent in these water systems, so you cannot discount those. Well, I kind of buried my head in the sand for my dissertation, get that done and out of the way. But I knew that we had to come back to this. So we went back to that quality database, the clearinghouse, I'm going to call it, and we looked at anything that we thought could possibly be nitrosatable and what was in there. And of course, these drinking water contaminants are not monitored by the Safe Drinking Water Act. And as you can see, there's D-isopropyl atrazine up there. About 37% of the wells that were sampled showed positive DIA, and the same with DEA. Then in parentheses, you have about 82 counties represented in that, and about 2,000 wells. Now, there might be some that we don't need to worry about so much. If you look at the second from the bottom, you'll see cyanazine, and you see all 93 counties are represented there, and about 4,500 wells, but only 2% were positive. So that some of these compounds we may not have to worry about, but we need to keep them all into consideration as we move forward. So we decided, okay, well, let's map these nitrosatable compounds. So, and how do they differ from atrazine? Is atrazine maybe a confounder here? Well, you can kind of see all the wells sampled for nitrosatable compounds. Those wells are on the left, and if you take atrazine out of that equation, those wells are on the right. So there was a little change there, but not what you would expect. We kind of thought that if we took atrazine out of the equation, that there would be very few wells testing positive. So we said, okay, well, how does this look over a birth defect map from Nebraska? So far we found it easiest to go by county rates, and we understand water flows from the northeast to this, or from the northwest to the southeast. So you can get why this might not be the best image of what goes on. But we really didn't see anything. When we mapped the wells that were positive for both the nitrate and the nitrosatable compounds, nothing really glared at us as being a correlation. But we did think it was important to move forward with evaluating some of these possible risk factors for adverse health outcomes. So we designed a pilot feasibility case control study here in Nebraska. We are recruiting 40 women, 20 women who have had children that are afflicted, and 20 women who have healthy children. We want to look at both the public water supply systems and the private wells and the folks that drink bottled water. Private wells seem to go by the wayside a lot. You know, that data just really isn't there. And so we're making a special effort to have some of those consumers included in this study. There's a questionnaire. Again, if you get on the Bow website, you can see this questionnaire. It has about 114 questions. Health related questions, residential history questions, demographic questions, lifestyle, things like that. And we're asking these women to allow us to come out and take a water sample so that we can evaluate for nitrate and pesticides, including all of those nitrosatable compounds. Then we'll do some age dating on that water so we can kind of tell how long has that been there. If it's not there today, it probably wasn't there before during this vulnerable period. I'm sure you can imagine exposure. Evaluating exposure is the hardest part because you really can't have a disease without an exposure, and the exposure has to come before the disease, not after the fact. And then we're asking the women to submit a blood sample so that we can look at some gene-environment interactions. Again, to put this simply, it's why am I getting sick and you're not? So again, you know, the epigenetics of this. Maybe this was a gene transcription that was handed down because mother was exposed. And we can't even really get to that kind of stuff yet. So we're looking for some of these nitrosamine metabolizers, and that's what's in parentheses. And some chromosomal aberrations, because we see a special chromosomal aberration with the non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. We don't really know if the aberration is there first, then the disease, or if the disease strikes and causes that aberration. And if you throw the exposure in there, maybe the exposure causes the aberration. And then we want to know why people are participating. I love the nudging. Holy cow, that is so important. And I'll get to some of our limitations here. Why do people want to participate? Why do these women want to participate? And what did we do right to make them sign up? I mean, come on, this is very time consuming. 114 questions. You want me to go give a blood sample? I live 100 miles from my provider. I have to make an appointment. I have these children, on and on and on. And what is keeping people from participating? Is it that first recruitment call where I couldn't understand a word that man said to me? Is it because I'm too busy? Again, I have these children, you know, my kids are in school, I work full time. What are the barriers and motivations for participating? So we started, I'm so excited, we started. This was a long haul. Again, this is a pilot feasibility study, so we wanted to target those areas that have positive wells and a birth defect case, at least one birth defect case. So with the help of our cartographer, whoops, you're good. We came up with 237 zip codes in the state. DHHS is a partner on this project. Obviously, they have to recruit the people because confidentiality issues, right? You can imagine. Why are you calling me? Where'd you get my name? I didn't sign up for this. So DHHS is sending that initial invitation letter out. We started with 400, actually 401. Martha is the dummy participant on the end of these recruitment calls, and that has been so enlightening. And I'll talk to you about that in a second. So 200 cases, 200 controls. The letters were sent out. 400 sent out, 140 of them returned non-deliverable. So we've got to sort through those. It's everything from no apartment number on the address to no house, no mailbox. So we think we can resend some of those. And this is what we're learning. People are all in or they're all out. We ask, are you willing to be contacted? So we have another group that is making those recruitment calls, and all we asked was, are you willing to be contacted by the callers? And that does not mean you consent to participate. It only means that you can hear a little bit more about the study. And people either said yes to that, and yes to the next question is, are you willing to participate in the motivation and barriers part of the aspect? It either went straight down, yes, yes, or no, no. We didn't have people that said, yes, I'll consent to being contacted, and no, I will not participate in the perception part. We did not have people that said, no, I will not consent to be contacted, but I will participate in the perception part. We are getting a few responses back. We had questions 3 and 4. The number 3 is, why are you not willing to participate? Too busy, don't do research. I can't remember what the other 2 are. The responses we're getting are too busy. We're too busy. And then the 4th question is, what water type do you have? Are they private wells, public supply systems? So we're kind of gathering that data right now. Limitations. Many of our participants were disqualified. They're not eligible because one of our criteria is that you have to be a resident at the current location for 3 years prior to conception. Makes sense, right? You have to be exposed before you can have the outcome of interest. And for this particular demographic, young women move around a lot. So we've lost quite a few participants because they're not at that location that they were during conception. We had one resident that said she was there and now she's moved to another state. And frankly, if she still had access to that water source, she could be included in this study, but that's not how our study is written. And so if anybody's interested in the problems with doing this kind of research on human subjects, I'm happy to chat with you, but every detail has got to be ironed out with a protocol to go along with it. So unfortunately, we lost her. Lost a follow-up. No response to the recruitment call. You know, we call and leave a message. People do not return our calls. And our question is, okay, so are they also going to be, like I said before, if they said we could call them, they also said that they would tell us about how they're perceiving this study. So we worry that they're also going to be lost to the participation perception component. To date, all of our responders are on public water systems. So the well type is another limitation here. You know, I hope we can get some ladies to sign on that use private drinking water sources. And I can only speculate on why that's maybe not happening right now. You know, maybe people don't want to know. I don't really want to know what's in my water. Are you going to shut my water down? You know, I don't have money to put in a system. Are you going to make me feel guilty because, you know, my family's drinking water that may not be safe for them? So we don't really understand yet why this is happening. Both study challenges. Well, it's right here in this room, seriously. Awareness of issues and related research. Unfortunately for us, we don't get out to mingle with the stakeholders very often. And again, that's one of the biggest gratifications of my position, but I don't have a lot of opportunities to do that. And we don't want to cause alarm. Hey, we don't know. We have a hypothesis. We just want to test our hypothesis. Do we know that this causes birth defects? We don't. Some people say that nitrate, it can be beneficial. Where's that cutoff of what's beneficial and protective versus what is not good? To stress the importance of participating in studies like these. Frankly, I don't know. If somebody called me and said, hey, I want you to do X, Y, and Z, and then they were calling me every third day to get my blood drawn, I might get real irritated. So we got to develop that rapport with these people. And then being able to disseminate these findings to the public. We need to take opportunities to share what we're finding in our research. I'll be the first to say, it takes forever. I've been working on this for 15 years now. It's baby steps, but we want to be able to share what we find with the public. Developing that researcher community and stakeholder bridge. We got to form partnerships. We can't do research like this without people. So we got to develop those relationships. And how the public, again, the perception of this research, do they feel it's important? Nebraska is such a good venue to do this kind of research, but these people need to feel like they're part of it, that they're a stakeholder. And then adapting methodology to increase participation. I'll just tell you right now, when the recruitment call came to my house, that guy talked so fast, I didn't know what he was saying. So some of these training opportunities, we need to get better at how we recruit people, and again, developing that rapport that we're in it together. Engagement and collaboration. This is not just my project. This is Nebraskans' project, and if we can do it in Nebraska, we can move to some other states that maybe have some similar issues. Oh my gosh, I just want to thank these people, Dr. Spaulding, Dr. Meza, and Dr. Shea. Frankly, I think they were believers in the importance of this kind of work before I was. So, Dr. Spaulding, he's a hydrogeochemist, and he just had the foresight, I guess you would say, to understand the importance of starting to look at some disease-related outcomes with the contamination that goes on. And I'm sure if you know him very well, he would probably have a story about me that I was the first student, and you can imagine what he might end up with. And Dr. Meza, she had a real connection to this kind of work. Dr. Mervish, he's world-renowned in his nitrosamine research, and so he was a little harder to convince, but he did come around. So, and of course our participants. Again, we couldn't do it without them. So we really extend our heartfelt thanks to the folks that chose to participate in this work.